Okay, everybody, Miss Farland here, and for tonight's whisk, we are going to look at how to use sensory words to create imagery. And just as a review, that imagery is when an author creates an image in your mind. So those areas of stories where you feel like you're there, you can smell the ocean, you can feel the tension, you can hear the sounds of the carnival, all those things that really paint those really vivid pictures in our minds that transport us, the reader, into the story. So how does an author do that? How do they use sensory words to create imagery? So grab your whisk and let's get started. All right, so writers use sensory words to help their readers see, hear, smell, touch, and taste what the story is about. And as you know, these are your five senses. And if you think about it, this is how we obtain information around us in the world, by seeing, hearing, smelling, touching. This is how we process information. So it's only natural that an author would tap into the five senses to create those vivid pictures of imagery. So again, that we as the reader feel as if we're right there with them. So let's look at this poem. In the morning, while I eat my oatmeal, I can smell the scent of toast coming from our toaster. All right, so if we take a look at this poem, it's pretty simple. So how can we add sensory words to this poem and make it better? So let's make this poem better. So in the chilly morning, while I slowly eat my warm and pasty oatmeal, I can smell the sweet scent of cinnamon raisin toast coming from our tiny tin toaster. So by simply adding in sensory words, so we can hear, what something smells like, feels like, tastes like, it really does add to the poem. It creates a more vivid picture, that you can kind of smell that cinnamon raisin toast. And when you eat oatmeal, it does have that pasty kind of consistency to it. So by adding these sensory words into our text or into our stories, it really adds an element of imagery, which adds far more interest, in your writing. So it's really about showing versus telling. So instead of just telling their reader something, writers use sensory words to show them. So let's take a look at an example to see, what I mean by this. It was cold. Okay, this is just telling the reader it was cold. And not only does it just tell the reader, it's really very boring. Anybody can write this sentence. A second grader could write this sentence. It's very boring. So let's take a look at how we can show the reader. As I spoke, my teeth chattered and my breath made little clouds in the icy cold air. All right, ding, ding, ding. All right, this is a much better example. And notice how nowhere in that sentence does it say it was cold, but we can infer or read in between the lines that because your teeth are chattering, we know that when we talk in cold, you can see our breaths in the air. This all tells us that it was cold outside. So it shows us as opposed to just telling us. And as you can see between the two examples, it's far more interesting, far more unique, far more creative. Yes, is it more challenging to write? Absolutely. But look at the difference, and think about how that makes you look as a writer and the creativity and the uniqueness that your writing will have. So let's take a look at another example. I am mad. Okay, again, that's just telling the reader. And again, a good way to think about this is that a second grader can write this. There's nothing unique about it. There's nothing interesting about it. As I clenched my teeth, my face began to singe and turn a deep shade of blood red. So again, that clenching of the teeth, how we have that heat that kind of starts to rise in our face when we get really angry. So this is showing the reader instead of telling them. Okay, and again, by tapping into those five senses to describe what you're talking about. All right, and this is a huge list of sensory words, and this is just the beginning. And you will have a list like this for school to help you with your story. So there's so many things that we can use to help us really kind of tap into those sensory words and to create that imagery. So tomorrow in an activity, we will work on using sensory words to help create imagery in your stories. So we're going to practice a little bit more with some teams and have a little competition about creating imagery, and then how can we apply it to your own story so that you really create those vivid pictures for your reader, which again adds interest in your story, creativity, uniqueness, power, all those things that you want your story to be. You don't want your story to sound like anybody could have written it, especially a second grader. We really don't want that. All right, so how do we take simple sensory words and to use them to help create imagery in your stories? Okay, so time to summarize. All right, so how does imagery affect writing? So think about what we just talked about with imagery and summarize on your whisk about how imagery affects writing. And then finally, questions. So what are 2 questions you have about imagery? And again, these questions can be anything that you are curious about, you're confused about, you wonder about. It's just kind of thinking about what is it that you're curious about imagery at this point. All right, so I will see you tomorrow. Get your whisk done, make sure it's all done, all complete, so I can give out lots of hundreds. And I will see you in class. Have a good day or night. Bye.